John, would you lead us in the pledge tonight, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Kathy, roll when you're ready.
Present.
Hayes?
Yes, here.
Barstow?
Here.
Lee? Pickens?
Here.
Walter?
Here.
Carter?
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum present. Any citizens' comments? Okay. Seeing none, the purpose of tonight's meeting, of course, is to review and discuss the preliminary city budget for 2017. And Jamie and BJ want me to walk you through it tonight, so.
That'd be great.
Kidding. Just kidding. Go ahead, Mr. King. Go ahead.
All
and
right,
take
thank you, Mayor. On everybody's desk should be a copy of the memo that I put together in regards to budget goals and highlights. I'm going to start there, talk about what we did this year with the proposed budget, and then Jamie will walk us through the budget handout that he gave us, the budget deck, as it's called. So first of all, a couple of the goals we had for this year after talking to council in regards throughout various meetings. First one is just to have a balanced budget. I think that's important to do every year. We do that every year. Second one was to focus on infrastructure improvements. Over the last couple of years, we've put some money towards equipment increases, equipment purchases, updating our equipment. And I feel that we're in a very good place with our equipment right now, specifically with the Public Service Department, with our in-house road maintenance that we're able to do, in-house drainage that we're able to do. So we're able to defer a number of the budget or a number of the equipment purchases to future years, which allowed us then to put more towards street repairs. Also, we looked at the budget and, the proper percentage or the necessary percentage of the share of the income tax between police, streets, capital improvements, and also debt service. As you'll see in the information Jamie handed out, he has the proposed percentages in there for the next 5 years. Also, the continued efforts to pay down the debt that we have. The information that I provided to you has an outline of all the debt that we have, what our liability is as far as debt, broken out by utilities and also broken out by road and infrastructure, and then the miscellaneous Marks Radio Tower and the 310 TIF. And also, as we've talked about the last couple of meetings, that we expedited the budget process, and we were able to do that by 6 weeks. That's going to allow for some more time, if necessary, for discussion, review, answering questions that council may have. I think that we have proposed a very conservative budget, a very good budget that is focusing on truly what our needs are as it comes to infrastructure and use of our income tax as we told the voters when they approved it that it would be used. A couple of the highlights that I just want to cover real quick, and Jamie may duplicate some of these, but our income tax revenue projected for 2017 over 16 is about a 3% increase, equaling about $157,000. You can see there next that I have the income tax allocation that's proposed for 2017 with 53% going to the police, almost 36% going to the streets, 2.45 going to capital improvements, and then almost 9% going to debt service for 2017. Our property taxes, we've conservative estimate of 1.5% of growth. The RAMP program that's proposed, and Alan will be covering this if there's any questions, and the street committee talked about this as well, is $600,000 of local funds, that being income tax money and permissive tax money. That's the most we've ever spent local funds on a road program since the income tax has been instituted. In the past, we've had much larger programs, $1 million, $1.5 million, but most of that was made up of debt service. So $600,000 of non-debt funding for our road program, which is the most we've had, and we're able to do that by deferring some of the equipment and maximizing the equipment that we have and extending their life. There's no proposed personnel increases for 2017. There is funding allocated for engineering design in 2017 for the Oak Meadow Drive project. The street committee talked about that as well at their last meeting. A good point is 2007 water service bonds will be paid off in 2017. That's $155,000 that we will not be responsible moving forward. So that's good. And then also the recreation programs. 2017 will be the first full year of recreation programs with registration fees and taking a look at truly what our costs are and what the revenue is going to be. If you look down below that with the debt service, I feel it's important. Every year we talk about the percentage of debt service or the percentage of the income tax that's going towards debt service. I thought it was important to outline exactly what that is. If you look at the utilities, none of the income tax is going to that, but just with the utilities, we're looking at a little over $12 million of debt service that we're responsible for. The first of those, as I mentioned before, will expire and be paid off in 2017, the next in 2019, and then from there moving forward, 2021 and further out. Road infrastructure, the first one we'll have paid off is the Summit Road SIB loan in 2021. And then if you look at the miscellaneous, the Marks Radio Tower and State Route 310 TIF money, those are going to be done in 2023 and 2021. So again, I think we've provided a very conservative, a very aggressive budget. I feel comfortable with what we've proposed as far as infrastructure improvements and as well as utility improvements, living within our current means as with our rate structure. So I'm happy to answer any questions with there. If not, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jamie if he wants to walk us through the budget presentation that he has provided.
I do have a quick question for you, BJ, and Jamie. When we did the Marks Tower, of course, we went in with West Licking, and for 5 years they were going to give us, I think, 10 grand. Does that go towards?
The money goes into the police fund.
Okay, police
Which
fund.
is used to pay off the Marks Radio Tower.
Okay,
Correct.
very good. And the Summit Road south, that would have been from Broad south to when that was done in 2012?
Correct. That's the Summit Road South.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Anybody have any? Yes?
Yeah, there's a section in here where it says that there was no funding for the shoot, what is the road? I'm trying to think. We were just talking about it.
Oak Meadow?
Oak Meadow Road, but that $100,000 was included, correct? That is
I don't know
included?
I don't know where it says there's no funding, but yeah, the $100,000.
Somewhere it says that we had to make a decision based on the funding for Oak Meadow, and that would deviate from someplace else, but is the 100,000 already there?
Yes.
Okay.
100,000 is part of that. What the decision is how far do we want to take Oak Meadow? As we talked about in the street committee, do we want to go ahead and treat it as, another street in any other street in the city, maybe widen it a little bit, or do we want to blow it out, do curbs, gutters, all of that? But the 100,000 for the engineering is included in the proposed street fund of the proposed 600,000.
Anything else before we let Jamie go?
Okay. For a number of you, this will be a little bit of a rehash for more the newer members, a little bit of a primer on budget structure. We budget at a fund, function, and object level. If you go to page 2, the funds are pretty clear. We have a street fund, we have a police fund, we have a general fund. So the fund part of it's pretty straightforward. The next level down is actually on page 3. It's the function. So you have general government, which is the administration. It's planning and zoning, and those types of things. You have executive and legislative, which is council's cost center, mayor's cost center, boards and commissions. There's court and legal, which is mayor's court and the law director. Police is pretty self-explanatory, as is public service, finance. So these are the functional groups that we budget together. And then once you get into that level, you look at the expense category. So it's the object, if you will. So we break it down into salary and related, which are wages, fringe benefits, pension, taxes, anything related to employee-related costs like that. Those all roll into salary and related. Contractual services are third-party services like legal, engineering, audit, any kind of professional third-party actual physical services. General operating is sort of the biggest bucket, if you will. It's supplies, materials, general operating needs, smaller dollar equipment. Capital outlay, obviously, that's pretty self-explanatory. It's the large dollar, either equipment purchases or infrastructure improvements. Debt service is exactly that. That is the principal and interest payments on any outstanding debt. And then transfers and advances are inter-fund transfers and advances. So if you're transferring money between funds or advancing money between funds, it would fall into that category. So when you'll see the budget ordinance in a few weeks, I guess, probably, you will see, general fund, function would be general government, and then it'll have salary and related contractual services and the like. So it'll roll up to that level. The budget book, the formal budget book, it'll be a fairly significant book, will provide you all the detail that goes up into that, but the actual ordinance that the council passes is at that level, and I have to manage to that level. So within that lowest level the council approves, I can move money around to help the departments operate. That's why you'll see supplementals at times if they need to move money from contractual services up to salaries or salaries down to capital. Because council approved the budget at that level, I can't change it without council authorization, and that's why we bring supplementals back to you during the year a lot of times to move money around. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of give you a primer on that's how the budget is structured. Going on to page 4, BJ hit on a lot of these, but talking about revenue, beginning fund balance in 2017. We start with the end of the year balance in each of the funds, the cash balance as of 12/31/2015. We take our estimated revenues for 2016 and our current budget, expense budget for 2016, derive with what our end of year balance is projected to be. So that's the starting point for 2017. Unless we have been notified or reasonably certain that we're going to receive a grant, we don't budget for grants just because it's an unknown. Although this year we have the Columbia Road Bridge Improvements Project because that's been approved and it's there. The income tax revenues for 2017 are 5.4 million, about a 3% increase over the current projections. I didn't add anything for the Jobs Ready site at this point in 5 years because it's an unknown until we have some certainty in terms of what we might be receiving. I'd rather be conservative and not put extra revenue out there that we may not receive. Again, property taxes, the county auditor provides me with what our estimate is for collection in 2017. So that's a pretty good number. But going forward, then I project about a 1.5% increase growth due to new construction or reappraisal. I didn't put anything in for utility rate structure. So there's some small growth projections for increased use, new builds, new adds, so some volume increases, but no fundamental rate structure changes. Although that's something that council, once you see the budget, you'll probably want to discuss that. On page 6 is the allocation. As particularly the more senior members of council remember, we bring an ordinance to council for approval that allocates the income tax revenues between debt service fund, the police fund, the street fund, and the capital improvements fund if there's funding available after you've allocated to the top 3. So the first slice of the apple has to go to debt service because we have to make sure we can cover the debt service first. Once we have the debt service covered, then the remaining balance is split. We take what they're proposing, the police and the street department propose expense-wise to see if I can make it fit and still have a couple percent extra to go to the capital improvements fund. And it's a little bit of Tetris trying to move things and kind of play with things to make it fit. And so that's kind of a trick at times. But for 2017, we are able to keep the allocations unchanged for police and street. Debt service is dropping a little bit for 2017. So we're able to put 30 basis points or 0.3% additional into capital improvements. So for 2017, we're expecting to put 2.45% of the income tax revenues into the capital fund. The capital fund is frequently used for, I'll call it seed money. If we have a project that, maybe we get a grant, but we have to put in 20% local match. It's a place where we can frequently find those funds to cover local match. If there's a project that's identified that maybe isn't a huge project, but we need to do it, where do we find the funds? A lot of times the capital fund is the source for that funding. So we try to keep some funds allocated into the fund so that we can build that fund reserve so we have availability, we have some flexibility when projects or needs arise. As you'll see, though, throughout going through 2020, it changes a little bit from year to year. Probably the biggest change you'll see is that debt service goes up in 2018 to about 12.7, and it stays about 12.7 to 12.5. Currently, that is an estimate of if we borrow the $4.5 or the $5 million all in for the police station, the capital facilities fund will spin off about $120,000 a year. That's rental revenue from here. Debt service will probably be between 250 and 300. So we need to figure out how we're going to cover that. But for now, I did it this way so that we could at least see the impact of it. Pages 7 through 16 are the revenues by all rolled up on page 7 and by fund on the following pages. It's just informational. I'm not going to sit here and go through this tonight because that's a lot of data to go through, but for your edification, I try to give you as many years history as I can fit on the page. So 13, 14, and 15 are actuals. Those are full year actual collections that are in the book. 16 is the budget. 16 year to date is year to date through July 31st. When we started this process, July 31st was the last full month we had in the book. So it may have changed a little bit. Well, year to date would have changed. 17 is what we're proposing, and then 18 through 21 are forecast numbers. Those are the numbers that have been used to determine the resources available in each of the funds for the departments to operate and for capital improvements and the like. We turn to 2017.
Mr. Nicholson,
Yes.
do you want us to ask questions as you're on
Sure.
the page, or do you want to go? Because I'd like to.
No, I'm happy to answer questions as we go.
Well, my first question is, as we look across taxes there, it looks like, and this is just a general question, it looks like you're anticipating income tax revenue to go up.
About 3% a year.
Thank you.
That's what it has been doing, right?
At times
No,
we've
it's
seen
not.
larger. The issue, though, the risk you run if I put like 5 or 6% in or 10% in, and it falls short, then we could run into a funding issue. And I'd rather be a little more conservative, make sure we have adequate funding for the projects and the services we are going to provide. On page 17, a few of some big budget expense assumptions. As I mentioned in my email, wages for this purpose only for developing estimates. I've included a 3% wage scale increase. Clearly, we are entering into negotiations, collective bargaining with both the FOP, OPBA, with all three, and the steelworkers. So that will remain to be seen what we end up with, probably after the first of the year. Hopefully, we can negotiate and be done before the end of the year, but those always seem like they take longer than you hope. And whatever those end up with is what we'll be coming back to you with. It could be, could be 2%, it could be 4%. We have no idea at this point, but as a placeholder to make sure that we're at least reasonably estimating what our expenses might be, I put 3% in there.
And that's cost of living type, right? That has no effect on step.
Wage scale shift, right.
Thank you.
And when I built the models, each of the departments have the wages calculated on a per employee basis, kind of behind the scenes, so that it knows that this employee is on step 2, it'll be step 3 next year, and step 4 the following year, so that it literally should be pretty accurate, and has been pretty accurate. It's a nice tool to figure out what your employee wage-related costs are. Insurance, medical insurance, again, when I built the models, my expectation was that we would see the 1-year surcharge, that 12.5% additional surcharge for the loss recovery, to roll off, and then we'd probably see a 10% general cost of inflation increase. That is not what we received the other day. We received a 12.4% increase that's on top of the higher number. So VJ and I are currently working on that and see what our options are, and we'll be having conversations with council in the near future on that. So, but it was not what I expected to see, and I was a little disappointed. So suffice to say, we're looking at what we can do.
As in shopping around?
All options are on the table for evaluation purposes. And that's probably all we should probably say in a public meeting. We'll just
Correct.
Very good.
We'll work through some stuff, and we'll come back to council and have a conversation.
Very good.
Pages 18, 19, and 20, although a lot of small print. This is sort of an income statement. The first page is all funds, the second page is governmental funds, and the third page is utilities. So literally, just real quickly walking through it, if you start up in 2013, the far left number, that was the fund balance at the beginning of 2013. You walk down the page, you see the revenues that came into the fund. So in 2013, all funds, we had $24 million of revenue in all funds. Then further down the page, we had $22,673,000 in expenses. So we ended all funds with a balance of $12.2 million. That then walks across all years, so you can go all the way up to 2021. So that rolls up all funds, governmental funds, and governmental funds are basically anything that's non-utility. So anything that, unless it's a utility fund, it rolls up into governmental. I'll skip over the next ones, but these are just a different slice. The pages 21 through 26, each one is a year, so you can see every fund, the revenue and expenses in the fund, and the end of year balance. So it just gives you a walkthrough on those numbers. That's sort of the primer on the global budget. Now at this point, we're going to hit the key funds, the general fund, street fund, police fund, and a few of those. General fund is Fund 101. Revenues are projected to be about just a little under $1.5 million, down about 2.5% from fiscal year 2016 due to reduced franchise fee revenues. Those tend to fluctuate based on the performance of, I'm assuming, Time Warner or the other franchise granted. So they've varied, so I'm being a little conservative and pull it back to more of the conservative run rate. Expenditures, about just a little under $1.6 million, and that's down about 17,000 or 1% from this year's budget. And really, it's just reduced contractual services this year, or in 2017. We're projecting to have a carryover balance or unencumbered funds that will be available for appropriation in a future year or during the year, of about $689,000, which is about 43% of annual expenditures, or that year's expenditures. Council has adopted a policy for the general fund and the key funds, street, police, to have a reserve ratio of between 25 and 35% of that year's expenditures. So that's sort of the guiding philosophy that I keep in mind when we're developing the budgets. The purpose of that, it's a best practice, and the reason for that is it's kind of your rainy day fund. The theory would be if the state said no more income tax collections, spigots shut off tomorrow, you're done. How long could you continue to maintain operations? So the theory would be at a 33%, we could go for about 4 months, so about a third of the year. The reality is, you don't do capital projects, you do other things, you find ways to make it extend. But the higher that ratio is, the better that your solvency is if you have financial distress. You have more reserves. And although the general fund is balanced, it's positive all the way through 2021. It does have balance declines in all years, which it means that the expenditures are greater than the revenues. So that's something, as we work forward, we want to look at that, because it's preferable to have a balanced budget every time where your revenues equal or exceed your expenditures. Sometimes, obviously, you can't do that, especially with not so much in this fund, but in like the street fund, given the amount of infrastructure work that we still need to do. We're spending a lot of money, and there is a lot of that force behind it. We've not added any new headcounts in any of the budgets. In 2016, the parks manager was currently paid in the general fund because there was no revenue in the recreation fund, but it's been moved to the recreation fund so that it can support that position. So that's a change from 16 to 17. On page 28 is just a graphic. Shows you high level what are the total revenues, expenditures, and the carryover balance. And the graphic, the green line is what you're seeing. That's the decline in the fund balance over the 5 years. Still positive. It ends 2021 with an 18% reserve ratio, so that's a little light. Ideally, again, it would be 25, so that's one of the things we're going to be looking at. This is the sort of the first pass. This is the proposed budget, so we're going to be looking at things in a little more detail, see what we can tweak, and see if we can figure out some things. Page 29, again, is the similar worksheet that you saw earlier, but it's just for the general fund. So this shows all the various revenues by year for the general fund, all expenditures proposed for the general fund, and then the ending year fund balance.
And this is just, as these drop, it's just because you're staying with you're not thinking about JRS, you're not thinking about anything other than just,
General fund, the only source of revenues for general fund, they don't get any income tax.
okay.
General fund gets property taxes, they get fines, forfeitures, the occasional miscellaneous like a parks grant or something like that. Generally speaking, it's really, property tax is probably 95% or greater of the funding source for the general fund. Yeah, so, I mean, as an example, in 2017, property taxes are $858,000, and we have some fees and permits of about $160, and then fines and forfeitures and things from mayor's court and the like. So, but it's still the lion's share of the funding. On page 30, we talk about some of the major items. In 30, we are increasing the use of the GIS system. There's a project in there that will be split between police, streets, water and sewer utility, and station, I think. So that they can all share on the use of the GIS system. So we'll have mapping for the various layers. And that's to hire some consultants and get some training as well in-house to be able to maintain that system eventually in-house. Parks, again, we moved the wages from the parks manager to the recreation fund. There's a handful of smaller projects, some parking lot improvements to municipal park, trail access, some incorporated parkland that's currently not, how did Dave say it? Basically, if it's not suitable for park use, but maybe clear it out, get rid of some trees, make it so that it's usable, or clear out the underbrush type of thing. Some master park planning, and then just some minor maintenance type of items as well. The CIP, which was developed in advance of this budget process, again, when we do the budget book, the formal document, there'll be very detailed project pages for each of the items that are listed on there. So you will see the description, the justification, what they want to do. But for purposes of trying to keep this document fairly brief, I just gave you the listing so you can see what's been proposed in the general fund and by year through 2021. And that's it for general fund. So if anybody has a question of the general fund, otherwise I'll move on to the street fund.
When you talk about different places using the GIS for mapping, do each of those individual groups allocate money to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll split the expense, similar to what we do with other things that benefit all departments. You share it across, particularly the utility, since the utility is an enterprise fund, it's a business. So we need to make sure that they get charged with their piece because they have a profit and loss statement type of thing.
Thank you.
Street fund, Fund 201. Budget revenues this year are expected to be $2.68 million, up about 12.3 thousand, about 0.5% from this year. Basically, it's a 3% growth in collections of income tax, but no growth in no change in the allocation, so it stays the same. But we had a lot of one-time revenues in 2007, a number of one-time revenues that we don't receive in 16 that we won't receive in 17. So that there's the fall. That's a reduction where the 3% is the increase. So the net is a slight increase in revenues. Expenditures are $2.39 million in 2017. That's down about $500,000, about 21% from the 2016 budget. And the biggest part of that is capital spending. I mean, we're just reducing the total dollars of capital spending in 2017 by about $500,000. The street fund is balanced, at least 2 of the 5 years, 2017 and 2020. So the 2017 budget is balanced, which is great. I like presenting balanced budgets. We're expecting to have a carryover balance at the end of the year, about $2.2 million, and that's about a 93% ratio, which sounds like a lot. I mean, it is a lot. However, if you look at the 5-year projection, we're going to be using a lot of that. There's money built up for the projects that we're planning. So that will drop down over the 5 years, and that's being planned for.
And debt issuance, debt's also in there?
There is, well, this fund isn't issuing any debt in the plan right now.
Paying off the debt.
The debt service is the allocation of the income tax revenue that goes directly
Okay.
to the debt service fund.
Okay.
Yeah, a
thank
portion of the income tax is dedicated to debt service
you. All right.
for non-utility debts.
For non-utility debt.
Correct.
Thank you.
If you go to page 34, same graphic. I like this graphic because it provides you with some very high-level, simple information, total revenues, total expenditures, your carryover balance. As you can see, the green line, we peak out in 2017, but then we drop in 18 and 19, and we're pretty stable for the rest of the time. It's a slight decline, but it's fairly stable at that point, which is good. I mean, that's the kind of thing I want to see. I want to see the stability of the fund balance. We'll see that with the PD next, that the fund balance maintains a stability we can work with. In 2021, the carryover balance, if you look at the bottom of 35, bottom right-hand corner, the carryover balance will be about $826,000, and that's a 28% reserve ratio. So that's kind of in the sweet spot. It's right. It's above 25%, but it's within the target range. So we'll be looking at that to see, if there's any way we can improve that. But that's what we're currently working with at the moment. Again, on page 36, hitting some of the projects and the initiatives. No staffing changes again in the street fund. In 17, as BJ mentioned, they're not anticipating purchasing any large dollar capital equipment like they have in the past, dump trucks, backhoes, those types of things, mowers. But there's three smaller dollar items. There's some brine equipment for road pretreatment, a trailer for some large equipment, and a skid steer. I have no idea what this is, but a cold planing attachment. So, yes.
The brine equipment, just what is that going to do for the city?
That allows us to pre-treat roadways before, and I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No
I
problem.
jump back to my old
I mean,
days
I
and go
think I
ahead.
know what it is, but I'd like an explanation. that's
It'd be
all.
a tank to put in a truck to put a brine solution on the roads as a pre-treatment during snowstorms or before snow events, and also a tank to go at the Main Street garage to keep that brine in.
Okay, so it's basically one vehicle that will be doing that.
We'll be retrofitting a current vehicle to do that, and what it will do mainly in the subdivisions. Subdivisions are always the last thing to get plowed or salted, and a lot of times by the time we get in there, everything's packed down and it's hard to get up. This will allow us to pre-treat, which will help once we get in there to go ahead and do a better job of treating those streets and plowing those streets.
Right, it'll help peel it up in the subdivisions and also on like 310 and 16 to get out there if we think something's coming. Go ahead and hit those. That way we're more covered.
So we're responsible for 16 and 310,
Yes, we are.
not ODOT.
We are responsible.
That'll help on the bridge for sure. That's great. Who's next?
Large equipment trailer?
Oh, I just want to follow up on the brine equipment. What have you guys been using to pre-treat?
Nothing.
There's no pre-treatment?
There's been no treatment, pre-treatment at all.
Mr. Fox?
Sorry.
And Alan, as
Sorry,
far
go
as
ahead.
this $30,000 number, is that something that you've already costed out, you've got prices for, or is this an estimate?
That's pretty close. We've got costs for at least this year for what they would be.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay. Mr. Fox?
Same thing on the large equipment trailer.
The equipment trailers, with some of the new equipment that we have, the equipment trailers that we have are, I'm going to say, barely sufficient to carry some of that equipment. So that would be a better trailer, more appropriate for the size of equipment that we have.
Okay.
And I'll bite for the cold planning attachment. What's that?
Just gonna make them out.
The cold planer. It is. We used it on Mill Street, a little bit on High Street and Town Street. It's basically 2 foot wide. It's a planer, so it chews up asphalt to about 1.5 inches, 2 inches down, and then we can go and put asphalt in there. It's just a cleaner repair on some of the. If there's a bunch of potholes in an area, we can go and maybe go 4 foot wide, and just make it looks really
So
professional.
that should say planer, not planner. I know what a planer is, so.
Oh. You win the award for the typo.
All right.
Yes.
Got it.
If I can, just if council's interested, a good place to look where this was successful was on High Street in front of Pataskala Elementary, where it was really in bad shape, and they were able to go in. We rented one of these and go in and hit it with it. It's done a great job.
That was my question. Is this a replacement or new?
No.
So another piece of equipment to keep us doing the roads.
Yes.
DJ, what did it cost you guys to rent that to use?
Oh. I can get that for you. I don't know off the top of my head.
Was it $2,000 or was it?
I'd have to,
Just one.
I'm
I
sure you
don't-
pay per day.
It was, I'm sure it was less than 2,000. We had it for a month.
yeah. And I can follow up and let you know.
Okay, and then obviously, as BJ mentioned, we've included a project in each of the years, 17 through 21, called Street Improvement Program at $600,000. At the time when we did the CIP, we just put that in as a placeholder with the roads to be determined. It's in that time, and it's included in here. The analysis and the recommendation of the roads is in here, so we'll hit that here in a moment. As far as roads, you can see the list. Again, the $600,000 for the street improvement program. Oak Meadow is $100,000. That's the design portion of it. 2018 street program engineering, so that's doing the design work for the following year's bid documents. $40,000 for the Columbia Road culvert improvements. And there's a Graham Road Kylemore improvement design work of $30,000, and detention pond maintenance of $25,000. On pages 38 and 39, again, the CIP, this is the summary. This is the summary document of what's in the CIP, so you can see all the project names, their priority, and the cost going across and the year that it's going to be incurred. Again, we'll give you the worksheets and the more detail behind these when we have the formal budget document, but for now, again, I just want to get these into your hands so you can see the dollars.
Andy?
On your funding source, we're only looking at 17 right now. Beyond that really is kind of just what you guys are looking at for
It's
future.
it's a best practice to do a multi-year projection, so 5-year projection, because what we need to see is between roads and equipment, what kind of funding needs do we need to have, and where does that end us with fund balance wise?
And all that's being approved is 17
Yeah, it's a
budget.
1-year budget. The rest is a forecast.
Then a question for Alan. On the $100,000 for Oak Meadow, that is the Cadillac version, or what we called it, Streets Committee, the Cadillac version.
When we were developing this, we were looking at potentially a large dollar project. So I threw 100,000 in at engineering, basing that off of 800,000 to $1 million total construction project.
So it is the larger project.
That would be for the larger project, and that 100,000 is separate from the 600,000 for the streets project.
But that gives us the engineering for the whole thing, and then we could do it in phases if we so choose, correct?
Potential, yes, that potential exists.
I have a question. Why do we not put things like annual Graham Road, Kylemore subdivision improvements in the ramp? What's the purpose of breaking out something in the street fund specifically versus saying it is a street repair? Why do we not put that whole thing in the ramp?
Alan?
That's a drainage project, and I separated drainage projects from streets projects.
And I assume engineering as well?
Correct.
So in the future, like let's say this year's engineering on Oak Meadow, next year is work on Oak Meadow. It would be,
In theory.
In phases,
okay.
in the ramp.
Mr. Fox?
Retention and detention pond maintenance. Where do we have retention and detention ponds that we maintain other than at the parks?
That's a very good question. They're not cataloged, really, that I have been able to find. There are some that I have found that are definitely ours, and there's some I've found that are definitely belong to an HOA or a subdivision. So I'm getting calls about those and trying to figure them out as we go. But I would like to catalog and provide a maintenance schedule for these for the ones that are ours.
Do you know of any that are ours right now?
The settlement of Pataskala, the large one as you come in on the left, and we're currently dealing with a beaver out there.
Ooh, can I?
It's not beaver season, is it?
It's close.
If you have a trapper for a nuisance, you can do it, which is what
Ooh, I can do that.
And I also say these ponds that we're responsible for, we are responsible and required to maintain them per our MS4 and PDS permit.
So, Alan, again, this is a 25,000 as an estimate for what you think might be out there, because we don't really know what the issues are right now. Is this also work being performed by in-house, or is this being? Choose you. Is this in-house or is this contracted?
To be determined. I think that would be a good number to start with. To get some work done.
Okay, follow up. Have we spent any money this year on any ponds, or in the last
Yes.
3 or 4 years have we spent money on ponds?
Past 3 and 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, no. This will be a totally new program that, as we continue to improve and meet the requirements of the MPDES, MS4, that we will be implementing.
And we'll also be implementing for private HOAs and like right next door to clean out their own.
Correct.
I'm working on that as well.
Enforcement type of thing.
Yeah.
to make sure
yes,
they're
that
doing
way,
it.
If I can catalog them and know who's responsible, I can, yes.
Mr. Fox?
I just wanted to verify what you were saying, that we in fact we weren't just taking this on because we wanted to be nice people. We're taking it on the necessary part for us.
We are.
That's necessary for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're required to do it per the NPD, yes. Unfortunately. Pollution discharge something system.
Okay, so following the list of projects, for the next 3 pages, so pages 40, 41, and
Excuse
42
me,
is
Mr. Mayor.
Alan's listing of
Hold on, Jamie. You have something else?
At the top of that, it says 2,000, at the top of 37, it says 2016 budget street fund, that-
Should be 17.
not say 17.
typo 2.
That's number 2. One more and you buy dinner.
Yeah.
For yourself.
Go ahead.
Down on pages again, 40, 41, and 42 are Alan's analysis and assessment of the projects to be included in the annual ramp program. So I don't know if you want to go through that or we just move on and look.
I do.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Headley's Mill Road, $450,000. Is that in the budget to do this year, Alan?
No, that would be 2018 is where I have that, at least as a placeholder.
Okay. So none of that information is on here, so we don't know what, I wouldn't know what I'm asking then.
If you, on
It's to
sheets
the
40 and
right.
41.
Okay. 40 and 41 shows that, but it doesn't show the year.
To
Yes,
the
it
right.
does.
Yeah, I show it as. in
Look
the
over
column
where the
under outside
450
scope.
is. Right where the 450
Oh,
is.
down on
Look
41.
across the top, it has the next 5
Okay.
years of road.
Okay, all right, that's good. Okay, I missed that, thank you.
Once that's chip sealed, then we can maintain it like we maintain Havens Corners and Summit Road instead of blacktopping.
Correct.
Good idea. Anything else? Mr. Fox? Mr. Walter?
Just a quick question. When you have these different pieces of equipment, the planing attachment, how, Alan, just looking at this, and maybe this is still not quite there yet, but when you look at the actual ramp and the items that can be done that are being programmed in the ramp, with those new pieces of equipment, how does that affect your budgeting?
The way I've accounted for that is if you see under the cost column, there's an outside scope and an in-house. So very little of the in-house made the priority 1. So there's only 1 on that first sheet, and that was the Crack Seal Legacy Estates. So that's $7,000 of in-house work. If you move down to priority 2, you'll see the in-house is quite a bit more extensive. Starting out with Crack Seal on Ashley Lane. I know I've got some Durapatching in here, Helen Road, and different places down through there.
Okay, but can I just point out, Applewood Street, for instance, you have spot surface repair and microsurface. With a cold planer, could you do that in-house?
Not ideally.
Mr. King?
What I will say, the cold planer that I anticipate it being beneficial for, though, is that each spring after the freeze and thaw, we have spots on different streets that pop up that we've gone out and just tried to patch and patch and patch year after year. We'd be able to really hit those and get them repaired with the cold planer. Kind of smaller areas that we'd be able to go out and do that, where it's not necessarily a 3-inch removal. Maybe an inch could go out, and or we could go out and remove an inch and then repair it.
And ideally in places where there's a lot of potholes. Applewood, it's kind of alligator cracked and just breaking up. If we tried to do a lot of cold planing on that, it seemed to me, from memory, that we would have difficult time with that. We might be able to do that and then get the microsurfacing hired out.
Mr. Hicken?
I think this is, if you're on the street committee or if you were at the last meeting, but can you talk a little bit about in-house and why it might not say anything on 18, 19, 20?
I anticipate that all of the in-house work that is shown in the priority 1 and 2 will actually be completed next year. I think the total there is $58,500. We should be able to get to most of that next year. And then, of course, when we do this again next year, we'll have a bunch more projects on here that would show for that year.
Thank you.
Mr. Fox, did you have a question?
I did. I'm actually just observing that I did take the opportunity to go down and look at in front of Pataskala Elementary where that work was done. And if you want to compare it to some of the work that was done prior to being able to have that piece of equipment, you can go to Make Street,
Great point.
just north of.
North of
It's really rough. It surely saved a lot doing what they did, and it stopped a lot of the potholes. But it's really rough, and some of the repairs we were seeing where they were cutting them out square and having that planer was a big deal. Do they have the equipment for the planer besides that?
Yes.
The brush, the brush and the ability to pick it up and clean it up and.
We do not have a broom. We have to scoop that out manually or push it with the bucket and scoop it out.
Well, it goes on the Bobcat, which we do have. The other thing I want to just point out is that any of the in-house repair costs are not included in the ramp budget. That's included in the operations budget for materials.
Did you want to ask him?
Yeah, I'm just looking through here. Where is Cleveland Road at on the ramp? I mean, at what stage? Because I'm not seeing it on this list, and I know it's bad.
We forgot about it. It's in Ward 2.
Yeah, forget about a lot of things. Try to anyhow.
It does show up in the 0 to 2, but we gave it a priority 3. So that's why it doesn't show up on these. This is just a 1 and 2 priority.
Okay. What designates something as a priority 3 versus a 1 or a 2?
It's somewhat, I guess, engineering judgment, but it was mainly ADT, daily traffic, and severity of the deficiencies of the road.
Okay. At a later time, I'd like to talk about that a little bit further with maybe some of the equipment that you guys already have and seeing if, it's going to need something before that based on the amount of traffic it gets from school buses.
Yeah.
The school buses. And if you're driving along there and it's very dark and a school bus is coming at you and you're hitting those potholes and chipped away road on the right side, it's almost hard to manage your vehicle when you're passing something large. So just like to look that a little further.
And we call that mailbox row, 'cause there's lots of residents replace their mailboxes.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Okay. Moving on, the next one is the Recreation Fund, Fund 206. And we're currently projecting revenues to be about $90,000. Obviously, it's a huge increase because we only had a partial year receipts in this year, so it's going up dramatically. Expenditures are projected to be $93,000, again up $83,000 from this year's budget. The big thing is we're moving we have a full year of program expenses as well as the parks manager being in there. One of the things BJ and I had a conversation with.
Parks Board today.
And it appears that the revenues. Dave and I had a conversation, maybe a little overstated. So in the next round, it appears that the revenue should probably be more like $58,000 or so a year instead of the $74,000. So we'll be pulling that down a bit. Just to give you a heads up, that'll be in the round 2 budget. We'll be modifying that.
Jamie, really quick, since I can't follow what you're talking about.
Okay.
Are you on page 44 now?
43.
I'm still 43, but I'm just, okay, so if we move to 45 as an example,
Okay.
the blue block, you'll see that
Oh, yeah.
there's $74,000 budgeted. It really should be closer to 58, based on 400 registrations in 2 soccer seasons and 10 teams for 2 seasons. You do the math, it ends up being about $58,000. So that's, we will probably be replacing that 74 by 58 on a go-forward basis. Yes.
Where's the 74 you're talking about?
Look at,
Way down.
On page 45, you go into the blue block.
45, I see the 74 for license fees. and-
Well, it's where it rolled up. I didn't like it. I fixed it after I changed the account number so that it would roll up into a better place. So for now, it's sitting in an odd line. It'll go up into governmental fees is where it'll be. But it's the registration fees is what that revenue is. It reflects the registrations expected. And after having a conversation this morning, we realized that was probably on the high side. So for conservatism, we're going to pull that down to what's more reflective of what we'll actually be seeing.
So that means your total revenue will come down and your fund balance expenditure percentage is going to lower.
Yes, it will cause the fund balance to drop.
And that's just soccer, spring and fall.
that's all recreation programs.
That's everything.
That's all recreation that the city will currently offer.
How much work did you guys do with the park board on this budget?
Dave worked with the Parks Board on the expenditure side, on the programs and the projects that they wanted to accomplish. And so then he and I worked together to get it into the system, into the spreadsheets and the like. So I think they're fairly comfortable with the expenditure side. I think they were uncomfortable with the revenue side of the equation.
And Dave worked with Jamie with the budget, just like every other department head, talking about what revenues were going to be, talking about projections and what projects would need to be.
Yes.
I guess I have a couple comments on this. My first question would be, though, with the revenues being amended, I know there's 10,000 coming from the general fund to essentially augment this fund. If you find that the revenues do show up to be less than what your expenditures are, how do you deal with that? Is that something where you want to keep a fund balance, or do you go back to the general fund, or how is that happening? And I've got a reason for asking that.
The expectation would be I'm planning on increasing the required transfers from the general fund to supplement that. The reason being, I want to have the recreational programming in a single fund so that it's not, some of the cost isn't hidden over there. We need to know what the cost of offering that service is, similar to police, similar to streets, what are the cost of the services being provided. So I would rather, I could pay for it out of the general fund, but whether I pay for it out of the general fund or transfer the money from the general fund, it's the same effect. The money's coming out of the general fund.
Okay. And then another quick question. We had a situation this weekend where the rain hit on Saturday. Softball fields were dragged Saturday, and then there was nobody to come back and do anything. There was water standing on the field on Sunday. Beautiful day Sunday. They had to cancel softball. How would you be able to have somebody that's available to go out and essentially work on the field? We've got a municipal softball program, and to cancel on a Sunday because there's the fields aren't ready for them to play, I guess is going to be difficult to keep that league going. It's like probably 2 hours worth of work, maybe an hour and a half worth of work, but you have to do it on Sunday morning. How do you handle that in typical city fashion?
Typically, how you would handle that is have staff to come in and do it. Right now, where the parks are managed by a part-time employee, parks manager, and also a seasonal part-time employee. And they maximize their hours that are budgeted for them to throughout the week. So typically how that would be done is you'd have somebody available on staff that has the hours to be able to come in and do that, and it would be supported through the budget.
Okay, I'm bringing it up because obviously if you cancel Sundays, you're not going to have a league. It's just not going to happen. Or we have to at least realize that to have that league, you have to have that available.
Correct.
I mean, there's no way around it. Okay. As far as the amounts, I think that I would agree with you that the amounts that you guys have in here for revenue is high. And 58 may be the right number if you're basing it on 400 per season as an average.
Right.
I would just caution to not overstate this. You know, obviously, if you overstate it, then we're looking at this being a failure, you know, right out of the gate.
I'd much rather, we'll adjust these based on the conversations this morning. I'd much rather budget low compared with our first year and see where, after a year, where we are with this stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the difficult things with this program, because we have, you know, this much experience so far, and trying to budget it for a full year.
Was there? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Was there a reason why you took the park manager out of the other funding, or at least because there's more than recreation than he does more than recreation. For instance, being available for, I'm sure he's going to be available for the Antique Power Show to help coordinate that. How do you justify? What was your reasoning on just pulling him out completely and putting him in the rec program?
Solely because his primary function is to service the recreational programs for the city. Nothing more than that. It was funded in the general fund initially because we didn't have the revenue or the funding source in 2016 budget for that person, because we had no revenues, no receipts. The expectation was now we have revenue receipts for registration fees, and that's part of the cost of the programs.
And just try to get a little relief to the general fund with that.
Seems like we're going to the opposite side. We're putting them all on the recreation that can't support them. We know can't support them 100% unless you want to have more programs. It just seems like we're going the other way. We're gonna totally tax the rec program and make it support more than just the rec programs, because he does more than just rec programs. So that's just my question.
Mrs. Carter?
I just want to, because I had the same concern about the weekend recreational. Somebody talked to me about that. We need to, as we go forward in this process, look at who we have allocated there and how they spend their time and see what we can do, because, I mean, recreational programs are evening, weekend type of things. They don't happen in a 9-to-5 world, Monday through Friday. So, I mean, if we're going to run a successful recreation program, we're going to have to make sure that the employees we have their time allotted properly so they can be there to service it for the user. Otherwise, we've gone through a whole lot of work to take something back on that's not going to work. So I just want to make sure that.
Mr. King, hang on. Oh, were you just? Yeah,
He was first.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Mr. Fox.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused. I'm not sure what else the Parks Director does other than recreational programs. I believe when we had our discussion, that's what it was recreational programs. He shouldn't have any requirements with the the parks as far as with the Antique Power Show, because that's done by an outside entity. That's not a city antique park show. The Power Show is not sponsored by the city. So I guess what other programs do we have going out there other than the rec programs that our Parks Director is in charge of?
I could say that. I could answer that if you want. You know, it's items such as getting a bench installed at Foundation Park. It's making sure the trees are cleared off of the trail that's being used by the walkers. It's going to a school and presenting, you know, for a new design at Liberty. It's dealing with all the issues that happen at a park, not just the rec programs. That's what I'm bringing up as, is it fair to have him be just recreation programs, unless you want him to just do recreation programs and not be involved in making sure that, you know, the porta-johns are in place for certain things that the city does supply for outside functions. I could see him being involved in next year in the rentals of the shelter houses, and taking that off of the administration's list. So that's what I was trying to say is there an allocation that can occur? But if it's only recreation programs that he is supposed to do, then get him out of everything else. And I don't know that that's possible. And I don't know that that's a good thing if he's the one that's out there in the parks. So that's what that was the basis of my question for the funding part.
Can I answer that back? I think that, one, we have an additional employee that's a part-time employee that should be doing some of those things. I would think.
Parks
that-
manager, you mean?
Right now, he's mowing.
He's mowing.
The gentleman mows, and that's all he does from,
Start
That's
to
all he has
finish.
time to do.
yeah.
That's all he has time to
That's
do.
all he has time to do.
And what fund is he paid out of?
Part-time parks mower. He's paid out of the street fund. He's out of the street fund,
Okay.
just to try to, so we have some place to pay it from. You know, that's what we're struggling with right now, is that we're going into the first year of parks and recreation. We have a parks manager, and we have a part-time seasonal employee that does nothing but mow, and that takes up the majority of his time, is mowing. So, you know, here it's we find ourselves again with the needs in the parks, but trying to come up with a proper funding source to be able to maintain the parks.
Well, I think I agree with Andy then. If we do have him doing other stuff, no use in letting this fund get destroyed. There should be, something should be switched around a little
We
bit.
can allocate it.
I mean, yeah, it should be allocated.
The question is, what's the correct allocation?
Well, what I would like to
Up
do is
to
take a
you
look at a
guys.
50-50 split and see what that does for between the general fund and also the recreation fund, at least for a year maybe, so we see what our true revenue is going to be from recreation funding, and see what that also means for the general fund. I think that, you know, a year trial for the first time the city's been in this for 9 years would be is probably a good way to go about it.
I don't disagree with that, but to be clear, the fund wasn't going to be destroyed.
No.
Any shortfall was going to be compensated by the capital, or by the
General fund.
general fund.
Yeah.
So I saw it both ways. I saw it as, okay, this is the first year you're doing it. Once you figure out what it's going to cost, if you put it in here, you then supplement it with that, and then you can figure out exactly what it's going to be. But I couldn't agree more that if our Parks and Recs director is spending time doing parks, then we should be slicing that part of the funding to him.
Mr. Fox?
Yeah, and then one more thing. I saw you write it down, Jamie. And what happens often, and has happened often in the past, is we discuss this stuff here, and somebody misses it. It doesn't get brought up again. So can we make sure that there's a note written on this, and our next discussion, we make sure we see it in here, or we see a change come forward out of it? We can always amend it back to what we want or anything else, but if something doesn't happen and it's not highlighted for us, our discussion tonight is going to be wasted because
In
we're
fact,
going to miss it.
I was writing it down. I was also wanting to confirm that is council's direction as a group to do the split. Confirm.
Mr. King?
And what we will do is go ahead and these discussion items, make those changes, but then also create basically a document to go along with it that explains what the changes are.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Is it, Todd, is everybody okay with that now? Suzanne? Andy? Melissa? Tim? Mike? Todd? Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yep,
I appreciate
all
it.
good.
We'll make that change. Moving on to page 46, there were 3 things that were identified. Improvements to Conway Trail, about $2,000. And a bike rack from Municipal Park. And in 2018, replacing the existing ice machine with a concession stand. So that's
500, right? Or is that 25,000?
Typo 3, okay.
It's one heck of an ice machine.
Well, actually,
That's
the ones
so
that we
think that's
are in
ice
there now
rink.
are 16,000 apiece.
The comma
ice
is in the
rink.
correct
We just
place.
bought a brand new ice machine for $4,000.
Yeah, the comma is in the correct place. There's an extra 0. So
Yeah, I was just asking that question.
very good.
We're going to have an ice rink.
Mr. Mayor.
Mayor says-
And that's it for the recreation fund.
Hold on just a second. Mr. Fox?
Okay, I'm going to ask for, and it doesn't have to have it now, Jamie, but I would like to know the total expense to the city of Pataskala for the recreation fund, completely, everything. Wages, wages for the part-time employee, wages for the parks director, all the expenditures that we're doing for upgrades to the different parks, what fund it actually really comes out of. I know we have some capital improvement money that I believe some of this stuff ought to, but I also believe I see a $55,000 possible expenditure for a roadway through the park. And I'm going to get on my high horse again that we've got streets to fix. And I don't want to bash the parks, just like soon I'll be going after some stuff in the police department, and I'm not bashing the police department, but we have other responsibilities that have to occur. And parks, to me, are not of the highest importance to the city. Streets are, and police are. And that being said, if we're going to have $100,000 going towards parks, I think it's time that the city asks the residents if, in fact, that's what we want. If you want to spend $150,000, $200,000 a year on parks, we can't provide it out of our budgets and continue to take care of our streets. So maybe it's time for a small parks levy to be put on the ballot for the residents to say yes or no to it. We have a successful park program we're working on taking over, and prices, it's just going to increase. Our budget amount every year is going to increase to assist and maintain the parks and do what we need to do. You know, we've got Oak Meadow, we've got Headley's Mill coming up, we've got all these different projects that we know that are going to be very expensive that we've got to provide for. And I'm not a big one to say we're going to take $150,000 and put it towards parks every year. Let's get some feedback from the residents to say, okay, we'll pay for this. I assume it would probably be a pretty small levy. You know, I'm not Mr. Taxman. Everybody knows that. But at the same time, I don't think that the city can continue to, you know, we put quite a bit of money in the last 6 or 8 years, about 4 years, I guess, 4 or 5 years. We can look at it and see all that we have done. I'm sure Parks doesn't think it's enough, but that being said, I just think that's something we need to talk about.
Mr. Walter?
I would disagree with you, Mike. I would say that the city does need to have the parks. I think they're extremely important. When you look at the percentage that would be spent on parks versus streets or police, it's a very small amount. It's a tiny amount compared. And I would tell you that being on the streets department or streets committee, we're spending more on streets now than we ever have. So I think the city is getting what everybody was promised with the income tax and with the police department. I think there are. I agree with you 100% that in the streets allocation and in the police budget, proposed budget, there are things in here that, you know, I would disagree with. Not bashing the police, not bashing the streets, but at the same time, I look at the parks budget, proposed budget, and it's very small. I don't see anything in here that I would tell you wouldn't be needed, and then some. I think that the statement that they've spent a lot of money in the last 5 years is totally inaccurate. I think there was a lot of money budgeted for the parks that wasn't spent. So I think there's a huge lack of spending for the parks over the last 5 years during at least the income tax. Being on the income tax committee, I was very much opposed to the money only going to streets and only going to police. Mr. Lenzo and Marissa both agreed with me, and then to the end of the debate went with the streets and the police only. You know, $100,000 or $120,000 spent on parks is something that's important to the city. It's shown through, and I can tell you firsthand, it's shown every weekend in our city. It's shown in the pool. It's shown in the daily or in the events that are held in the city that are put on by other people. It's shown that the parks are an integral part of the city. As far as the $55,000 for the street in the park, I would say that's a street more than it is a park street. That's used every day by the school buses, by the residents to use it as a street. To say that that's only a park street, I think is also not accurate.
Mr. Mayor.
Hang on. Anybody else wish to speak on that?
I'm glad Andy said that because I was gonna. And I would say that when you talk about we need to talk to the people, if you're out talking to the people or if you spend any time in the parks, they're extremely happy with the parks and they absolutely believe that it is part and parcel of the city and it's what makes the city a good place to live. So
We've created a way of life. The parks are included in that, and you couldn't have the power show and the fireworks and and the Easter egg hunt and all those things if you don't have, I just don't. I guess I'm on the same bandwagon. So
Okay, well, let me make my pitch now.
let me make sure everybody's done speaking. Go
Okay,
ahead.
I'm last, thank you. If you don't have streets, a park is no good. So if you spend $150,000 of street money on parks, that's $150,000 that we can't spend on Oak Meadow, that quite honestly, because the park is back there, one of those subdivisions, we will bury a kid soon. Traffic is horrible. We don't have any control of that street. We're putting kids in peril by allowing them to go back through constantly down those streets to get to that park. And all I'm trying to say is a street, to me, is more important than the park. And I will tell you that residents in this community a number of years ago stated that 7 times in a row. So for me to spend money on parks when I know that 7 levies in a row failed, small levies failed, the community wasn't willing to support them. Before I spend a mass amount of money on parks, I want to know that the residents want us to do it. And that's all I'm saying. But if we don't have roads to get to the parks, we don't have parks, and that street is not a street, it's not a legal street. It's always been discussed that it's not a legal street, it's not a safe street. It follows none of the requirements for the state of Ohio for a street. Close it. We've talked about closing it. And if we're going to complain and say we're going to spend $55,000 on it, we're throwing a patch on it, and then we're saying it's okay to be a street, when in fact, it is not a street, and it's a liability for us if we act like it's a street.
Well, I
mean,
guess I'll just.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't know if. I'm sorry, I haven't been recognized.
I'm almost done. I know you guys get tired of hearing me say this, but if we just do the roads and don't do anything else and keep a balance in this city, then people are going to wave to us on our brand new roads as they drive somewhere else to go to another park in Gahanna or Granville because we don't have, our parks aren't maintained or usable if we don't put a little bit of money in them. Andy's right. That's a drop in the bucket compared, and we've nobody up here or on the previous council has neglected, as soon as the income tax kicked in, making sure that we made sure that we started working on streets and catching up as fast as we can. It's just not going to happen. We're always going to be paving. Even if you got all the roads done, it'd be time to go back and do the first road that you did when you started, because it'd be time to do it again. We're always going to be doing roads. I'm done. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Save that for one.
Again, as I stated when I started, I'm not talking against parks. I'm just saying, we have a funding mechanism. The funding mechanism for parks right now is the general fund / streets. Say what you want, we're paying somebody from the street department, from the income tax, to mow that grass. And we're not evidently paying enough, because it appears we need more than that, because we need other help. Put a small levy on, let the people decide, quit funding it out of the general fund, quit funding it out of the street fund if it passes, it at least gives us an option to continue. I'm not saying don't fund parks. And if what's in this budget probably will get my okay. But I'm just saying, if we keep doing this year after year after year, we're going to continue to put more and more money in there. And in fact, the residents have a right to decide. It's not only our decision. So I'm in favor of a small parks levy somewhere in the near future. And again, I'm not against parks. I love the parks. I have fun with the parks. I volunteer with the parks. I do stuff with the parks. That's not what it's about. It's about the funding mechanism that we're choosing, and we're taking it out of our general fund, and we're taking it out of our street fund. And
Okay, we got it. Let's move on. Jamie?
Okay, page 49. Next fund is the Park Use Fund 207. For those of you who may not be familiar with this fund, when a developer builds a property, they pay a fee for the property, for the house or whatever is being built to support capital improvements in the parks. So this is money that is restricted purely to improvements in our parks. It's projected for 2017 to be about just under $31,000. We had a really big year in 2016. It's sort of an anomaly, so I pulled it down a little bit to reflect more normalized rates. Expenditures are projected to be $48,000, and although they're up a little bit, this is the kind of fund that, as we have funds available, we can use them. It tends to, I think Tim called it the heartbeat fund balance. I mean, you have funds, and so you want to do a project, so it's a big spike, and then maybe you go a year or two without some big items. So it's kind of it's an unusual fund in that respect. That's why if you look at page 50, you'll see that we're using the funds. We're spending a fair amount of the balance down through 2018, and then the number of projects, the blue bars, the revenue lines exceed the expenses, so we start building our fund balance back up through 19 through 21. On page 52 is a list of the projects that are being proposed for the Park Use Fund. Big dollar items are the leach bed installation in Foundation Park. We currently have that, the tank pumped on a regular basis, and so the thought was if we were to do a leach bed, we would eliminate that regular cost of maintenance. Surveying and pinning of all the city parks, repaving a path in Carr Park. Dave's proposed a park shelter house roof replacement program, basically setting aside $5,000 annually to do repairs, replacement, kind of making sure that all the shelter houses get looked at and repaired on a regular basis. There's some, and on page 53, there's more detail, but parking lot improvements at several parks. Again, more park pond management and maintenance. Two other things there. So, all told, about $48,000 in capital projects. Again, these are all things that are coming out of the Park Use Fund, and it's restricted to that purpose. So these seem to be appropriate for that fund.
And just a note to ourselves, when Jersey Baptist comes to town, they love those roof jobs on single stories. If you supplied the material, you'd have free labor. So let's keep that in mind for park shelter roof replacements.
5,000 could go a lot farther than if all we're doing is buying shingles and roofing paper.
Much further.
Mr. Fox?
52 totals about $77,000. Page 52.
30,000 Liberty Park improvements are in 2018.
Okay. All right.
I
Thanks.
just put it in there so you'd see that.
Okay.
it's
Gotcha.
one of the big
Okay.
ticket items.
I didn't picture that. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Mr. Walter?
On page 52 and then page 46, what's the difference between the work that you're proposing under the Recreation Fund and any of those projects that you're under the Park Use Fund?
Generally speaking, the park use should be more related to capital-related improvements to the parks. The ice maker, as an example, is equipment for the recreational program, which is part of that initiative. I suppose we could put the bike rack in there. Probably the improvements to Conway Trail could clearly be there, so we could, those are.
I just wondered.
Sometimes it's whatever fund we pick in working together on it.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes in some of these funds, it's the Tetris thing. We're trying to make the fund balance
Right.
work. So,
Yeah.
and that's all I had for the park use funds. If there's any other questions, otherwise I'll move on to a real small budget, the police fund. It's Fund 208. Projected revenues are just under $3 million, $2.93 million, up about 44.7%. It's due to a 3% growth in collections. They had a fair amount of one-time revenues in 2016, so they're not going to have those one-time revenues, so that offsets it to some extent. Expenditures are projected to be just a little over $2.9 million. It's up by about 6% from the fiscal 2016 budget. Again, the biggest piece of that, obviously, in their budget is salary and related, and they have a lot of bodies, so it does cost a lot. Projected year-end carryover balance is $1.43 million. It's equal to just under 50% of 2017 expenditures. So that's a very strong reserve ratio. One of the things to keep in mind when we are evaluated by Moody's or S&P or any of the rating agencies, one of the factors that they do look at in the financial fiscal health of the community, of any community, is its reserves ratio, the ability of it to weather economic downturn. So anytime we can have favorable fund balance, they'll never tell you how much that factors in. It's a black box, and it's kind of voodoo that they do, and they don't share it with me, but that is one of the factors that they do consider is reserves. If you look at the graph on page 56 and the table, what you'll see is virtually a horizontal line, and that's what I was mentioning earlier, that the police fund at current staffing and current equipment and everything else as proposed by the police department is a stable budget. It is level as far as the fund balance. It's balanced, relatively speaking, give or take. I mean, you might have a year where it's a little bit above or a little bit below, but generally speaking, it's a fairly stable budget, which is really good to see. I think the low point is in 2021, where the fund balance equals 42.9% of reserves. So that's good. As far as what's the unique items, they are proposing to purchase 2 new police cruisers, estimated about $40,000 each. That's all in with light bars, anything equipment they have to add to make it user friendly, but appropriately equipped. They propose requiring 3 cruisers thereafter. They've got a lot of cruisers, and as they get older, they get a lot of hours on them, and we start to see the maintenance pick up. It's interesting as I get the maintenance bills to approve for payment. I always look at the year and say, okay, so what year are we starting to see? You always see the public service department. You'll see it's a 2001 or 2005 truck or something. It's like, okay, well, that's expected. You start seeing the 13s and some of even the 14s. You start seeing some significant maintenance. You realize they really, these things get run hard. They may sit for a while, but then when they take off, it's hard on the car. So that's what they're proposing: 3 cruisers per year going on out. They're proposing funding of $40,000, over $80,000 total, but $40,000 per year in 2017 and 2018 for construction of a shooting range. I know that's been one of the discussion points as well as far as the new facility. I think the expectation was the city doesn't want to put a shooting range attached to the part of the new police facility because of the cost. I think they were estimating it to be about an additional $1 million to add a firing range, an indoor firing range. So I think that what the chief and deputy chief are proposing is to establish an exterior shooting range that would be city property, basically. They're proposing a purchase of a utility vehicle. I think it's like like a gator, so that they can drive around and maneuver back in parks when there's activities, 4th of July parade, or 4th of July fireworks, whatever, street fair, so they can zip around and get around through things. Again, the annual transfer to the debt service for the LGIF loan payment, but we also do get, offsetting that, although we're transferring that over, we receive the revenue from the fire district, which goes into this fund, so it offsets it. And they have 2 more years on the Marks radios, so that's a $26,000 expense. And 2018 will be our last payment on that, and then we'll own those radios. So that'll be good.
Chief, do you not anticipate changing those once we own them?
No.
They should
They're all mostly in good shape.
Okay.
Becomes more a replacement on an as-needed basis at that point.
Chief, would you walk us through I know Jamie touched on it lightly, but I think everybody needs to know the background on where we're at now with the outdoor shooting range. Of course, the $1 million one that obviously we don't want to do because maintenance is you talk to anybody that works at Bullet Ranch, the maintenance is crazy. So, but talk about that for just a second, would you?
Sure, I did some research when we started talking about the new building, and on top of the $1 million cost to build a 6-lane indoor range, you have filter issues that are thousands of dollars every couple of months, and that's something I just don't think we need to get into. Going off the model of the state's police academy in London, Ohio, they have what they call a 3/4 range. It has a roof but no sides. Therefore, you eliminate all the need for filtration and things like that.
And where we're shooting at right now,
That is a major issue.
Right.
A while ago, we were out kind of off on our own in a part of the sewer plant. Well, with their newest building, it is encroached on that area, and it's just not an optimal place for Nathan's employees. It's just they're working a lot closer to the range, and we did have a very wide buffer zone, and now we don't.
and what's your proposal?
To build the new range at the water field off of Mill Street.
The unused well field.
I'm sorry?
The unused well field.
Unusable.
Abandoned well field.
All right, we'll start with Mrs. Carter.
Have we looked at, I mean, I'm sure we have, so what would the cost be of us having some sort of a contract with the Bullet Ranch to use their facility?
I haven't looked into that for one reason. We do a lot of training on our own, and that we have, of course, we never close. We're there all the time. Our officers have to get worked in, at weird hours. There's that, as well as, for instance, if we take a weapon off of somebody on the street, before we take it to the case to the prosecutor's office, we have to do basically a test to see if that weapon is operable. So, at any given time, we may have to go shoot, 2 or 3 rounds through a weapon to take that information to the prosecutor's office. It depends, on the charges.
And when we qualify, does those lanes at the Bullet Ranch qualify for our qualifying?
No, because we have move and shoots, and theirs is all static. You have to stand behind the their little benches, and, we move from 50 foot to 20 foot and things like that.
Anything else, Mrs. Carter?
No, that was
Mr. Fox?
Chief, I had mentioned to you about a frangible range. I know that a lot of police departments are going with frangible, which doesn't create your filtration system, doesn't affect your filtration system whatsoever in a building. And if you're talking 6 lanes, you're probably only talking, 6 lane would probably be 24-foot wide area. And with a frangible range, you certainly could still have, you'd have 25-foot to run and shoot and do what you wanted to do. It's basically an open building. The NRA has some background information on the frangible ranges. A lot of the manufacturers of frangible ammunition have the ballistics on it, that you can look it up and understand that ballistically they're within fractions. My concern is that, one, this 25 acres in fact, has been discussed by Parks and Recs to be an additional park. 25 acres is a pretty big chunk of property in our city to dedicate to a shooting range that could be 75 or 100 foot long by 24 foot wide. I think it would be better for the city to consider adding it to the police department. I don't think your numbers are going to be anywhere near $1 million for a frangible range, because I know what the numbers are for frangible range in the sizes. Although I openly admit I don't know what your training encompasses. So, maybe that wouldn't, but I do know that many police departments are going to frangible, particularly for their practicing and their qualifying, because it's a safer round for them to use. A lot of big cities are going for it because it's a safer round. But I can't see taking a 25-acre plot in the city and utilizing it for a place for the police department to shoot and have no other use of it. I'd say we sell it, we move it out, we get rid of it if we're not going to use it for a park. The only reason I never asked to get rid of it before was because there was consideration that it would connect to Carr Park underneath the railroad tracks, which is also another option that has been discussed with Parks and Recs.
Any input?
Can I address the frangible? The problem with frangible on an indoor range is you still have to mitigate the lead.
No, you don't.
It's a powdered lead, and you have to use a hazmat crew to come in and remove the powdered lead.
Chief, all due respect, frangible is copper and tin and has absolutely no lead in it whatsoever, including in the primer. There's no lead whatsoever in these. There's no requirement. They're $2 more a box of 50. It is not powdered lead. It is copper and tin, and there are no requirements other than 850 CFMs, and I'm sure the engineers in the room understand that that's not very much for air movement. So I think if you look into that, I can give you a name of a company that provides it. They can give you all the ballistics and all that type of stuff. I just think at a time that, I think we're going to see problems with, if you look at our plan in the future, those are not always going to be houses over there. Those are going to be professional buildings. So we're going to have an outside range with professional buildings. That's what our comprehensive plan calls for, office and professional. Are we going to have office and professional buildings with an outdoor range sitting in the backyard? I'm not sure they're going to appreciate that.
Mrs. Carter?
Tim has a question I've already asked.
Okay, Tim.
I guess my first question is, I don't know about a comprehensive plan putting buildings next to it. And my second question would be the use of that field. First of all, if frangible range works and it's within roughly budget, and you guys think it's the better way to go, then you bow to the powers that be that know weapons, as would be my gut feeling. But also, would the use of the mill field as a firing range totally preclude the use of 25 acres, or in your feeling, would you not want to put an extension of a park? I mean, is it safe? Do you mound it? Is there enough? I think Mr. Fox is right. That's a large plot of land. Could you put the firing range at the northern, I guess it would be the southeastern corner of it, kind of a deal, and then the park could still maintain a walking trail or something in the area that wasn't there? Or does moving a shooting range there through safety concerns and citizen concerns preclude any other use of that area?
I don't believe it would preclude that. My plan was to use about the western third of the property. I don't know if you're familiar, but there's a cattle gate there.
Absolutely.
I would fence the western third about off with a chain link fence with, make it secure, and just use that.
Mrs. Carter?
The expense of whichever way we decided to go, the mill field or adding it to this station, can't we make that part of the project of building the station in that funding? I mean, instead of putting it in the annual budget?
My opinion would be it's a separate parcel of land. I don't know if they would be willing to do that. And I would also, Mr. Hicken, I would mound 3 sides of it. You would be shooting into a bowl, a big U.
I just wasn't sure when it comes down to the specs if, they say, yeah, I assume that's what you would do. 'Cause it's kind of the setup we have now, right?
Yes.
With a mound there, but
Yes.
is conventional wisdom, hey, you don't have anybody within X number of feet because if a weapon discharges up in the air, you don't want a kid walking on a trail, blah, blah, blah. So I wasn't sure if that also played into what Mr. Fox was talking about.
I believe I missed Mel's question. You were asking if it could be rolled into the construction money? Yeah, it could be.
Mr. Walther?
Before we give up on the existing site, what exactly, so you can explain to me exactly why the existing site doesn't work? And secondly, do you have any idea what the existing site cost to put together? I mean, before we give up on that, is there any augmentation that can be done to that? If we've spent money over there to put a site in at the treatment plant, I just hate to throw that money away. Or what was done to make the site that you're using now work?
It's been there as long as I've been on the department, 21 years. We haven't really spent money on it other than time to make it usable. The problem is that again, we were kind of off by ourselves, and now we're not. There's a building right next to it, up on top of the hill. It'd be different if it was down and we could put a barrier between the range and the building, but we can't because it's elevated and it's like right at the back of the range.
Yeah, you have a natural hillside right now that they've been
what it
shooting
is, yeah.
into for years. They didn't have to put any money in it. Now there's a building. It
Well,
just doesn't-
I guess my question would be, is there potentially a $15,000 remedy at the existing site that you could do to augment that site? I don't know the site well enough, but I'm just trying to go back and say, we've got a site that works. It's in a spot that you've used for many, many years. And is there anything we could do that's a lot less expensive to make that site accommodate what you need?
In my mind, no. That's why it's in the budget. I mean, I feel that for safety reasons, we have to move it.
Nate, is there anything EPA-wise with what we're doing down there also that might, if we're putting something in that close to water or?
Well, the hillside now is in a floodplain, so, I don't know if there's any EPA requirements on how much lead you can pump into a side of a hill before it becomes an issue. I can't
Well,
speak to
that does bring up another question too. I mean, do we have to go in, I've cleaned up shooting ranges before, and do we have to go in and actually clean up the old one that's now not being utilized? Does anybody know if that has to be cleaned up? If it's been used for 21 years,
There's a lot of lead in that.
There's a lot of lead in there.
a lot of lead in there. Does that have to be cleaned up once it becomes a non-usable firing range?
I don't know. Nate, do you have anything to?
I can't
Here-
speak to that.
Let's,
No idea.
for the sake of time, let's know that we all have to look at what you proposed, what everybody's proposed, and keep working on it. So,
I just have two little things on it. One, Chief, if you did put that on the western side, the western side of that is a agricultural area in permanently. That is the Holman Farm, and it's always going to be an agricultural area. I mean, it's in there.
Protect.
So that would have less effect, like I was saying, if but the rest of that area south of it is all office and professional in our comprehensive plan. So as you said something, Tim, about the comprehensive plan, I would highly suggest that we get a copy of our comprehensive plan to all of our newbies, excuse my language, but all the new people, so that they can see what our comprehensive plan carries in it. And the next question was going to be on mitigation of the lead, which is becoming a major problem for a lot of cities. I don't think that, other than the EPA affecting it now, there's no law in Ohio on it that I know of, but I know that there are some EPA guidelines on it, which is why frangible was an option for us to even discuss. So I agree with the mayor. If you can look into some of that stuff, maybe we can put a building somewhere down there. Maybe we put a building over here that's a range. maybe we can do something that will, work out for it one way or the other, but it's all good discussion.
Okay, anything else on the other police items?
Yeah, I've got
Yes, sir.
one other question. You guys looked into, I know, I don't want to sound like I go out and exercise that much, but as far as a utility vehicle, what about bicycles? What do you guys think about that?
In the state of Ohio, to have a bicycle patrol, you actually have to be certified. Our current K9 was one, so he's kind of out of the picture. And the other bike patrol guy we had, he's moved on. He doesn't work.
We had a
for the department
canine that could ride a bike?
Yeah, I was going to say that's pretty good.
Wow. Hey.
Give him a bike and he was gone.
Probably, right?
So we don't currently have anyone like that. But, I would use it more for patrolling. You're right, a bike would be good for a situation like that, but I can think of 2 instances in the last year that we've had to recover stolen property off of the railroad track property. There were 7 motorcycles, dirt bikes were stolen, and it was a really hard time. Some of them had flat tires and stuff, and we had to push them from about halfway in between High Street and Columbia out to where we could actually get them. And I think a utility vehicle like that would assist in situations like that. And, again, patrolling the...
Kind of fault. Go ahead. The parks have 2 gators, and one of them gets used like zero amount. Matter of fact, the tank that's on there could easily be removed. I just wondered how much you guys have actually talked about departments utilizing vehicles. So, for instance, if you had motorcycles that were on the railroad tracks that you had to go drag, I mean, you've got 2 really nice gators that the Parks Department has.
We actually did just use one just a couple weeks ago.
Okay, I just wondered if you guys
up
had
on the power
looked at
line
that.
up on Broad Street. We have used them. It's just it would be nice not to have to rely on somebody else.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor?
yes.
Cruisers. I still can't get my head around this, so why we replace 3 a year, and why, I understand what Jamie said. It just, as I talk to people that know vehicles, I spoke to a resident again today. He told me, he said, there is no way a cruiser's done at 75 or 80,000 miles. How are our cruisers doing mileage-wise? Are we still going with the $75,000 or 75,000 mile suggestion that was voted in by council a few years ago? Is that what is prompting the replacements of these, or?
Now, we use that as a low-end benchmark, but you have to understand that a cruiser with 75,000 miles on it has hundreds, if not thousands, of hours on it. Those are hours on a car is way worse than the actual miles. As Jamie alluded to earlier, a cruiser can sit or go at low speeds for 5 hours, 10 hours, and then, have to run hot to a call, getting up to 70, 80 miles an hour. They wear out way faster than a 75,000 mile car.
And that's why we decided years ago to make sure all the new cars we bought had hour meters on them, so that the maintenance could be done by hours, because they run all the time.
Can we see that information on some of the cars that you plan on replacing next year?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Other places, I mean, you're talking about, I think you had 2 new cars this year, correct?
Yes.
So you're talking 16 cars in 6 years to replacement and through this budget. What is a typical police of our size district? What is their replacement? Do you have any other information on what, for instance, another locality would be utilizing? I mean, as far as replacement.
Most departments, I won't say all, but most around here will use years. If it's 2 or 3 years, you can go on government websites and buy cruisers that have 30, 40,000 miles on them, because as Jamie alluded to, once you can literally watch those bills, and as a car gets a few years on it, they go up drastically, and I think it's just prudent to get rid of those and keep the miles down and hours down, and you have a lot less maintenance issues.
Plus, we don't want the car breaking down when it's coming to my house. Anything else? Jamie, back.
Okay, moving on.
Are you sure?
I had one other
Okay,
quick thing.
go
You know, I had a couple conversations with some police officers talking about the labor negotiations coming up. What part of is that it covered in the police fund at all? I mean, as far as okay, so you know, from what I
Which part? Which part? I'm sorry.
labor
You talking about the legal costs?
no, I'm talking about the actual officer costs.
As far
the
as
police fund.
yeah.
So what I understood was that they had some concerns about what their pay rates are now and how much they've been asked to put towards their health care. I see a 38% health care increase potentially. That's going to also be put on the police fund. How much has, other than your first assumptions that I would call it, as far as the increase in labor costs, how much more have you looked into this? I mean, have you talked to some officers? Do you know where, not only the officers, but the union reps, how much more do you think this is going to increase?
What's that?
We've been
ahead.
we've been served by SERB, the State Employees
Just on
Association
Friday.
Board, with the FOP's notification of intent to negotiate. So at this point, anything we would say in a public meeting, we have to be rather careful.
That's fine.
We will be starting the process. I would imagine we need to coordinate back with their legal counsel because initially it was sent to Rufus Hurst. So we need to make sure we get the right people in contact. I would imagine over the next probably month to 6-8 weeks, we'll probably be starting our initial negotiations with them. And they'll be sharing their concerns, and we'll share ours, and we'll talk economics and other things.
Okay.
Okay. Back to you, sir.
Next fund is on page 61. It's the capital improvements. 101. Revenues are projected to be about $153,000, down by $5.3 million. Well, the capital fund got some unusual revenues this year for projects. So that's why it's such a major change. Expenditures are projected to be only $87,000. In 2016, the project included the Mink Street, Main Street 310 project, Summit Havens Corner. So there were a large number of big dollar projects in 16 that won't be recurring in 17. If you turn to page 62, you'll see the bar charts themselves indicate the difference in the fund. The Capital Improvements Fund is one of those funds that, again, has, as Tim called it before, the heartbeat graph where you may not spend much and then suddenly you spend a lot. So it's how it works. It will be, you can't, and this one you don't even look at the 25 to 35% ratio just because of the nature. If you don't have the money in the fund, you don't spend out of the capital fund. That's how that works. On page 64, the listing of the projects. In 2018, there is about $4.1 million for Mink Street Phase 2. That is the ODOT project, so that is the Morpsey attributable grant money. But I have to reflect that as an expense. And on the other side, I have a federal grant revenue. So it nets to zero, but in governmental accounting, I have to book both sides. Taylor Road, Cleveland Avenue Trail and Sidewalk, that's a 2018 project for about $681,000. Of that total, $545,000 and some change is a grant as well. So the cost on that's about $136,000. That's the local match for that project. And then spread out over 2020 and 2021 is Headley's Mill Bridge replacement. Outside of public service, the parks are proposing, as we talked earlier, $55,000 for improvements to the road in Foundation Park. And that's pretty much the projects that we have currently listed in the 301.
I just want to bounce right back to Alan real quick, just for clarification. We're doing a culvert on Columbia, and that's us. And the bridge is paid for, right? The Columbia Road Bridge for next year is paid for.
Yes, we have a federal bridge program grant for the Columbia Road Bridge, which is just north of Broad Street, which will be in 17. We're putting in an OPWC application for the culvert on Columbia Road, which we'll hear by the end of this year whether or not it's funded.
Early next year, but yeah.
Yeah, or early next year, yeah.
Mr. Fox?
Yeah, as we look at $55,000 on improvements to the Foundation Park drive-through, or whatever it's called. Alan, can we look at that and see? I know in the past, we've been told we shouldn't have flow-through traffic on that. I thought we closed off that road at one end so that they could get through to the subdivisions in the back, through both subdivisions, so they could get to the parking lot or to the traffic light. But, and I know that the mayor and others have talked about halfway through closing it off to where you could come in part of the way, go to the parking lot, come in part of the other way, and go to the parking lot.
And open it on the weekends.
And open it on the weekends. So, but I just guessed that, another $55,000, and it's still not a road. It still shouldn't be driven on as a road. We ought to use caution with it, Mr. King, just to make sure that we are not putting ourselves in a situation. And I'm sure Brian will say, well, they can't sue us anyway, so but that's what attorneys say, so.
Right, and I have to agree with Mr. Fox. I'm so adamant that road somehow, some way, be not used as a cut-through, because power show's coming up, and I told you what happened at the fireworks that morning. I had, 30, 40, 50 cars by 8 or 9 o'clock, and all they were doing was cutting through. And when you're cutting through, all you're focusing on is why you're cutting through, and you're speeding. You don't care about old people walking. You don't care about kids on bikes. You're just cutting through. So please find a way to stop the cutting through and then improve it all you want. But please. Mrs. Carter.
How do we come up with $55,000? Is that what it costs to patch it? Is that what it costs to completely replace it? Is that what the engineering cost to figure it out is?
Did you have more involvement in that one, Andy?
Well, I think, I had some discussions with that. That's basically fixing the patching the big potholes, doing a little bit of drainage, and doing an overlay on top of it.
Chip and seal?
Overlay, not chip and seal, not pavement.
Right.
That's all you're going to get.
Yeah.
For $55,000. So I forget the exact distance. I think it was almost 3,000 feet. So
Okay. Anything else? Okay, Jay.
Okay, that concludes the governmental side of the business. Now we move on to the utility and Nate's world.
Nate's World.
When it gets fun.
Discussions of product. The utility water fund is 601. Revenues are projected to be 1.2 million, up about 1% from this year's budget. Expenditures are 1.3 million and down a little bit, about 3% from the budget. Just some reduced use of contractual services, some engineering and legal fees. We're expecting to end 2017 with a balance of $273,000, equal to about 21%. The utility funds typically should have a higher ratio, carryover ratio, just because of the nature of when they run into issues, they tend to be very expensive issues. They tend to not be inexpensive ones, so the reserves need to be stronger. So that's not necessarily a strong thing for right now. It's positive, the fund balance is positive only through 2019. If you turn the page, the line on that chart crosses over in 2019 and 2020. It's slightly negative, and in 2021 it's even more negative. So obviously that's a source of concern, and we need to have further discussions on how we deal with that, whether it's expense control, revenue increases, or a combination of the both. But obviously there's a source of concern there.
Jamie, you took it. This is a silly question. I'm not going to have it. Forget it.
Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, God.
You have the floor, Tim.
The bond rate that falling off is calculated into this, right?
The 17 that we pay off.
Yeah, that's
That's a
in,
solid
there's a
question.
fund for water utility debt service, and there's another fund for sewer utility debt service that are separate from this.
Between you and Nathan, apart, and I'm not saying that it's not necessarily the best, what other revenue streams are there? I mean, is the only revenue stream that we can really identify rate?
For this right now, yes. There's a third option, but it doesn't fix my problems, but provides a revenue source for another angle.
More capital
Yeah.
related. and that's also, we're gonna see that in the next fund.
Okay, thank you.
So, due to the lack of resources in this fund, pretty much you'll see on page 70, there's no projects included in this fund for 2017. It's pretty much maintaining operations at current level, wages, supplies, fuel, and materials, and those types of items. And that's pretty much it for the water utility fund, the 601. The 602 is the water capital improvements fund. And it's where the CIP fees are deposited. They go into this capital fund. The lion's share of the debt service comes from this fund. It's transferred from this fund into the water debt service. Again, revenues are projected to be about $524,000. We got a lot of large tap fees this year. Again, it's a spike, an anomaly, so conservatism, we pulled it back down. If we have a lot of large tap fees, obviously this fund would be helped by that. And knock wood, maybe we'll get some. But I'm always reluctant to rely on one-time revenues, because as soon as you plan on it and they don't come through, then where do you go with that? Yeah. The only capital project proposed by Nate for this fund is an upgrade of the water booster station. We put it in the budget at $425,000. Obviously, we have not done any official, cost studies, estimates. It's Nate's expertise estimating what he thought it might cost. So that's subject to change if we get to that point and we do an engineering study and get some costs, preliminary cost estimates.
And that number is, after some discussions with Jobs Henderson, this project will be more than just upgrading the pumps. It'll probably be a building expansion. Bypass pipe work inside so we can maintain flow throughout construction project without an external pump. So the complexity of this kind of shifts from, it's more than just pumps at this point to really plan for now in the future. So I know originally I threw in some lower numbers, but this is a better number.
Okay. On page 76, basically, just summarizes the two main projects that he's proposed. The annual meter, the electronic meter replacement program, about $20,000, and then the water booster station. But just to highlight, the concern is, if you look at the graph on page 74, again, it's positive slightly through 2020, but in 21, we cross over. Now, again, if I get $200,000 in tap fees in 2016, the metrics change. The graph
17.
in 17, yeah. Well, if we can get them in the next couple months too.
Okay.
But I mean, so it's like the capital fund in that it's subject to those types of fluctuations. You will notice that on the bottom of page 75, the last line under expenditures, you'll see $600,000 a year from 17 on. Those are the transfers. That's the debt service. So we're transferring $600,000 a year from the Water Capital Improvements Fund to pay for the capital improvements that were done, and we borrowed debt for it.
Is it possible to lower those numbers? I'm looking at 300,000, 211.4. Why does it jump up to 6?
It's a function of how the debt structures were. We have various levels of debt, and some of them were on level debt service. Some of them go up in their debt service. So maybe the year one it was 100,000 in principal, then 200, then 300, then 400. So it depends on how it's structured. I typically like to do level debt service just because then whatever the number is, it's the same throughout. Yeah, that basically is the funding required to cover the current debt service.
Meet our obligation.
Yeah, meet the obligation.
I wasn't sure if there's some, I know you can't pay off bonds early, but or at least none of these utility bonds, but I wasn't sure if perhaps you guys had accelerated that slightly for some
No, that's
reason.
just to cover the debt service that's out there.
All right.
And again, when we do the full budget book, there is a section on the debt, so you'll be able to see every debt issuance and the principal requirements and the interest requirements, as well as the fund balance outstanding. So that'll all be there. Moving on to page 82 is the sewer utility fund. I'm sorry, not 82. It's on page 79. Sewer utility fund. Again, this is the operations side of the business, not the capital. Revenues are projected to be 1.22 million, up by about 12,000 or 1% from this year. Again, the primary driver again in the expense reductions down a little bit, about 168,000. There was a fair amount of contractual services in 2016 budget, legal fees, engineering, and the like, which won't be recurring in 17. This fund has a pretty decent carryover balance, 600,000, which is about 42% at the end of the year. So that's a positive. But if you look at the graph again on page 80, 19 is still positive, 20 is got about 100,000 positive, but then obviously we're negative again in 21. So clearly we need to figure out how we resolve those shortfalls in funding for operations. Again, just as in on page 82, there's no projects other than maintaining operations, current operations in 2017. And that's it for the 651 fund. I mean, it's basically wages, supplies, and some contractual services. On page 85, sewer capital improvements fund. Again, this is just like the water one. It gets the CIP fees, tap fees, any one-time capital related. Revenues are projected to be 515,000, down by about 80,000. Again, one-time tap fees this year. Hopefully, we'll get some more next year. But budgeting conservatively. Expenditures are about 536,000, down about 600,000 from this year's level. And it's a function of the debt service transfers. If you look at the graph, this is the one fund that the utility that is a bright spot. It has if you look at the green bar from 17 through 21, it's trending up. So that's a very positive outcome. So we might be able to work something between the two, the sewer capital, and the sewer operations potentially. That might be help give some assistance. But we have to make sure we're in compliance with all the regulations that council set in place. But we'll look at that.
Nathan, I know where the rubber meets the road, you don't want your sewer and water to mix. Is it the same way in funding?
Yeah, it is. They have to be separate within the budget program. We can't use sewer funds to pay for water projects, vice versa.
Thank you.
But there are a number of projects and things that benefit both. So just like the allocation of staff that we do multiple funds, if there's a project that benefits both water and sewer, like the utility billing, we charge to both water fund and sewer fund. So we do split the costs where we can. And in the sewer capital improvements fund, there are two projects: the annual meter replacement program, similar to the water fund, and a 40,000 study for the water reclamation phosphorus removal study. Defer to Nate on what exactly that means.
Basically, our permit changed a few months ago that we have to start testing for orthophosphate. Phosphorus is a big issue across the nation. This is related to algal blooms, things like that. We are required to have a technical and financial capability study completed by December 1st, 2017 to the Ohio EPA on our plan or future plans on getting our phosphorus level down to 1.0 milligrams per liter. As a point of reference, naturally what we're at now, we're knocking it down about 60%. We're on an average of 3 milligrams per liter level. So I've tried everything I can with the facility that we have now to try and biologically remove the phosphorus. We are very limited. So part of this process is an engineering study to come in and say, all right, basically here's three options, here's the cost associated with it, and more than likely proceed with an improvement project or with proper documentation with an external study and with what we just did on our stream study. I'm hoping that maybe I could come through and say, look at what a good boy we've been. Can we not go this route because we're improving the stream, can we maybe delay it? Because our permit will be renewed in 2019. So I'm hoping to delay it to that point, and then throughout this process, if they say you have to do it, at least I can delay it until after our next permit renewal, and then plan accordingly. I would estimate that if we have to do a construction project, which is in my notes somewhere, could be anywhere $100,000 project. That's reality now. So,
Andy?
Nate, I didn't ask when we were in the water part of this, but the three-phase projects for the upgrades to the main lines. I noticed you don't have those in here. Those are you decided not to put it in any of the projected budgets for.
well, the hope is with that in the areas where we want to do the pipeline modifications, and I can't speak for Scott, but there's 650 homes in the pipeline coming into our water system. A lot of these developers, I'm hoping to use that as a leverage point to help us make some improvements for these loops and kind of put that on them. The first step right now, if you put a gun to my head, we got to do something with this booster station ASAP, and then phase 2, 3, and 4 will be looking at the main line and kind of comparing what we can afford, because as the budget stands now, unless we hit a huge boom next year, this might be the only project for several years. Just living within our means. So that's why I'm kind of getting to that point, saying if a developer wants to throw in 200 homes, then they're going to help us put in a loop a part of their project. That's.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we weren't.
Yeah. Oh no, it's on the list. It's just I can't. Where we're at with the budget now, it just too much shock and awe. Great.
Anything else?
Well, you asked that question. Last quick question.
Yeah.
The metering, that's not what Andy's talking about. Andy's talking about the lines, right?
Yeah, the main lines.
The metering is part of the metering that's in the budget that we discussed and briefly, that we discussed in the.
That's our annual stock.
I know, I'm talking about the.
16. What you're doing
I'm,
right
I'm,
now,
I'm talking about the new meters.
New
$24,000.
meters, 20,000. Yes.
No, he's talking about the big project at the plant. Are you talking about the one at the water plant?
The booster station.
The non-magnetic, the non.
You're not.
That's
Yeah.
total separate.
Mag meter. You're not talking about
It's
mag
done
meters.
this
You're
year.
talking about the dynamic flow
Yeah.
meters.
Yeah, the flow meter.
2016 purchase.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's.
I want to make sure, I just want to see I was in there. All right, I'm sorry, that's it.
Mr. King.
The only other thing I'll say, Scott is not here this evening. He's in Chicago representing us, as he reported previously, but Planning and Zoning Department is business as usual, no large expenditures or anything, and just basically an operations budget, which would be included.
You want to wrap it up with anything?
No, that's, I've got a number of notes here. We're talking about splitting the parks manager. We'll look into that. I'll also look into moving the part-time mower position into kind of get everything aligned so that it's all cleaner to see. I also have your request for looking at the all parks costs. I'll pull together some quick analysis. I'll send to all the council as far as, the funds and what it's for, just kind of a one-page, real quick and dirty summary. I suppose are we gonna have more conversations? I stepped out in the middle of the shooting range. I don't know if
We'll have more conversation.
we'll have
on
more
that.
conversation on that, so that's it. That was the main things I have, but you and I will compare notes
Yep.
and see if I've missed anything.
Yep.
And we'll go from there.
Well, I just want to say I thought this would be about an hour of an icebreaker. It turned into 2 hours of great information. I feel like I have a little handy pocket guide here that I can look at. So good. What's that?
That's a big pocket.
Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. When you saw the real budget.
When you see the real budget.
Yeah, this is a handy pocket guide, but nice work. That was all good information. I can't believe it's been 2 hours, but it was all good stuff. I hope you all agree. So,
motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn by Mr. Fox and seconded by Mrs. Hayes. Discussion and roll.
Fox?
Yes.
Hayes? Yes. Barstow?
Yes.
Pickens?
Yes.
Walter?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.
I'm so ready. Like, we don't.
Feel like giving him wants to go back.
Me either.
Janice texted me, she's gonna cut those checks.
Yeah, I got big pockets. Chairs down.
Don't put your chairs down, people.
I would do that too.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.